Welcome, everyone. I'm Rebecca Goldbert, the Executive Director of the Helen Diller Institute for Jewish Law and Israel Studies. We welcome you to part 2 of a 2-part webinar series entitled The Impact of the Israel-Hamas War on the Arab-Palestinian Community in Israel and Implications for Shared Society. This semester, we have been exploring the impact of war and the questions facing Israel and the region in several different ways. In today's conversation, education scholar Ayman Agbaria and legal scholar Masua Sagiv will explore the impact of the Israel-Hamas war on the Arab-Palestinian community in Israel from a civic-educational perspective, with a focus on citizenship, education, religion, and belonging. In part 1 of this series, legal scholars Manal Totri-Jubran and Masua Sagiv explored the Arab-Palestinian experience from a social, political, and legal perspective, with a focus on discrimination, rights, and remedies, and the complexities of citizenship. Other recent webinars have explored international law and human rights perspectives on the war, examining Israel before international law mechanisms, with international law scholars Yuval Shani and Elena Chachko, and the sexual and gender-based violence on October 7th, with law and gender scholars Ruth Halperin-Kadari and Masua Sagiv. We will also host our final in-person conversation of the semester this very evening with author and Shalom Hartman Institute Senior Fellow Yossi Klein-Halevi and UC Berkeley Professor of History Ethan Katz, entitled Debates Over Zionism and the Future of the Palestinian-Israeli Conflict. Lastly, we continue to invest in our students with a cohort of 30 undergraduate fellows engaged in leadership training, including how to have difficult conversations and how to engage across differences, and planning relevant programs for their peers. Please refer to our website, social media, and our email blast for all of these programs and for recordings of past programs. All of the programs, activities, and events of our institute are dependent on philanthropic support from the community, and we thank you for your continued support. I'm honored to introduce you to Ayman Agbaria and Masua Sagiv, our guest speaker and moderator for today's program. Professor Ayman Agbaria is a researcher, poet, playwright, and social activist. He serves as an associate professor in the Department of Leadership and Policy in Education at the University of Haifa. He is also a faculty member at the Mandel School for Educational Leadership. In 2016, he served as a visiting scholar at the Center for Research and Evaluation in Muslim Education at the University College London Institute of Education and at the Institute for Islamic Studies at the University of Vienna. Professor Agbaria holds 2 master's degrees, one in International Development and Social Change from Clark University and the other in Criminology from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. And he also holds a dual doctoral degree in educational theory and policy and in international and comparative education from Pennsylvania State University. Professor Agbaria completed postdoctoral studies at Cambridge University. His areas of expertise include education among ethnic and religious minorities, policy and pedagogy for civics education, Islamic education, and teacher training. Masua Sagiv will moderate the conversation. The Helen Diller Institute has been blessed to host Professor Sagiv the past 3 years as the Koret Visiting Assistant Professor of Jewish and Israel Studies. She is also the scholar in residence at the Shalom Hartman Institute. We're thrilled to share that Masua Sagiv will continue as the Koret Visiting Assistant Professor with the Helen Diller Institute for a 4th academic year in 2024-2025. And as you've heard, she is expertly moderating several programs for us this spring. Professor Sagiv researches and teaches on gender, religion, and law, gender and Judaism, law and social change, and comparative constitutional law. Please join me in welcoming them both.
Thank you, Rebecca, and thank you for the Diller Institute for hosting these interesting and thought-provoking conversations. Ayman, it's always such a pleasure and privilege to be speaking with you and to hearing you. So welcome to this conversation. Maybe I'll give just a small framing, even though I'm assuming that not everyone were on our part 1 of this program. The Arab-Palestinian society in Israel is 21% of Israeli population. And the questions of identity and belonging were always complicated in Israel. And these days, they are more complicated than ever. On the one hand, after October 7th, it was very clear that Hamas didn't distinguish between Jews and Muslims and Christians as long as they were Israelis. And we are seeing in poll after poll, including one program that we've seen that we did here with Bar-Ilan University, we have seen that the percentage of belonging and feeling a part among the Arab-Palestinian society are on the rise. But on the other hand, we are seeing also, as the desire to be part increases on the Arab-Palestinian side, we are seeing almost a rejection by a lot in the Israeli Jewish population based on distrust, based on fear, based on other maybe politics that we'll discuss during this conversation. And maybe we'll start in something very basic. Ayman, can you speak about the place that the Arab-Palestinian society in Israel are at right now, maybe focusing on some of the emotions, on the fear, both from the Palestinian side and from the Jewish side?
Thank you, Masua. Thank you for the Institute also for hosting me for this webinar. I think the best way to describe the Palestinian minority is to describe it as a trapped minority, as a minority located or situated in a double periphery. So on the one hand, it's on the periphery of the Israeli society, of the Israeli society, but it's also on the periphery of the Palestinian people. And especially after Oslo, this situation of double periphery was intensified after Oslo, because Oslo, actually said that, for the Palestinians in Israel, that you don't share a political future with the rest of the Palestinian people, and
the Oslo Accords of 1993.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
And Israel as a Zionist and as a Jewish, state, still didn't figure it out how to accommodate and how to give a place, status for this national minority. It's a national minority. It's not just a Druze and Muslims and Christians. This is a substantial Palestinian minority. Every fifth person in Israel is a Palestinian, including me. I'm a Palestinian. This is how I see myself. This is how I perceive myself. So being in this double periphery, it's and it generates a mix of feelings, and ambivalent feelings. So on the one hand, you feel that you are part of the Palestinian people, and this is what most of the people here in Israel feel like, of the Palestinian minority. They feel that they are part. What's happening now, the mass destruction, the mass killing, actually, also in Israel, the rising toll of casualties and victims in Gaza. It's disturbing. They feel a very deep solidarity with the people of Gaza, seeing the pictures coming out from Gaza of destruction and killing and famine, and it's really awful. On the one hand, they feel that they are part of the Israeli society, in the sense that they want to be part of for example, of the controversy on what is the goal of this war. What is the aim of this war? Is it a just war? Or is it not? Should we differentiate between a just war and a just activities in wars? How we should approach the 7th of October? And most of the people rejected. Some felt dismay. Some felt that this act doesn't represent neither their nationality as Palestinians, neither their religion as Muslims. So it's in a way they are trapped between these moral powers, two, very huge powers, dominant powers of, of belonging and and right now, people are feeling, that they are losing their sense of citizenship. They are losing their trust in the meaning of citizenship. The Israeli citizenship became very hollow, became very empty. Now they don't trust the police with this, with Ben Gvir being the minister of the police now, and the national security in Israel, and for this selective enforcement, they don't feel really that they don't trust the higher education system with lecturers and students being persecuted and being, there's a lot of pressure right now. There's a lot of pressure, and we can talk more about these manifestations, especially when it comes to the law, the judicial system, and the higher education system.
Yeah. So you're talking about the hollowness of citizenship and the emotions and the fear. When you were talking, I was reminding myself that me as an Israeli Jew, I have people outside of Israel that are, that have my back in a sense, right? Because I know that the Jewish people is behind me. We have disagreements, we have different visions and as to how Israel should be, but basically I feel not as alone, even though as an Israeli there is a feeling of aloneness. And as you were speaking, I thought of this sense of loneliness and do you feel like what do you feel are the alternatives to this sense of loneliness for the Arab-Palestinian society?
The Arab-Palestinians, it's not just emotions, it's emotions, shouldn't dictate politics, at least I mean, they should, be part of politics, should be,
Yes.
reflect politics, but, eventually they shouldn't guide politics, otherwise we would end up with vigilance, with people, with the seeking for revenge and seeking
Yeah.
for, this is not a good recipe for us to live in a coexistence and reconciliation. So I think that, Palestinians, the same as Jews, they suffer from this hyper solidarity. We all subjected to this hyper solidarity. Like Jews in the United States and in Israel and in anywhere, from the very beginning, they should reflect and demand and show their loyalty, their solidarity, that we stand together, we are part of the same nation, and I think we need, and the same Palestinians, you are expected, like to feel empathy, to feel, with Hamas, or being part, being part, a legitimate part, eventually, like of the Palestinian, national movement. This is, Hamas is not just, a couple of people, this is not a faction, this is not a sect. This is a movement. You are talking about an ideology of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who really adopt, an Islamic perspective as how to approach the conflict between the Palestinians and Israel. Now we could disagree, we could agree. This is a different now debate, but eventually you are expected as being part of this national movement that you feel this is the hyper solidarity. Now, what you do with hyper solidarity, and there are mechanisms that all the time feeding, nourishing this hyper solidarity, and it's very hard to be critical. Now, as a Palestinian and as an Israeli, I'm trying to escape this, this hyper solidarities,
From
from
both sides that are
both
pulling
sides
you.
that are pulling me now. And I think we need, when you face a trauma, Misua, you have two options. Trauma like the 7th of October, this was a trauma for the Israelis and for all Israelis, also Palestinian Israelis.
Mhm.
Now you could work it through, or you could acting it out. Now, what is the difference between the two responses? The first response, acting out a trauma, the trauma hunts you. Now you would repeat it again and again and again and again. It doesn't liberate you, it doesn't give you a space, a distance to be critical, to contemplate, to see like what is my role, what is the ethics that and what was how my ethical world should guide me through my responses to this trauma. I'm only focusing on the pain. Now, this is good for a while, for a month, I don't know, like now. But you need also to work through traumas, to work through العباد, like you need to
Process.
to process this trauma. So you need a distance. You need a little bit distance. And think we all need now distance. We are almost 200 days, after this trauma. And I think the trauma would accompany us, would still live with us. But this would be the trauma of the people who were really victims, the direct victims. But people, excuse me, who are living in the States, or living in even in Tel Aviv, they are not direct, victims. It's time to stand up now and to say, like, okay, now I'm taking a leadership stance, I wanna now mirror, reflect, to help the victim. Now you don't help the victims, the direct victims, the people who were evacuated from Nir Oz, from the
Yeah.
kibbutzim. This doesn't help them, that you are now, competing with their pain, saying, no, we have the same pain. No, you don't. You don't. These people left their home. The same that I can't really compete with the saying that the Palestinians in Israel are now persecuted, and they are firing, or I don't know, like I'm trying to find the right words in English, in the higher education system, trying to, narrowing the spaces for freedom of expression, and this is, I can't compete with this. It is really neglected. With the pictures coming from Gaza, with the destruction, the famine, the like Ra'av, how you say in
Yeah,
English.
famine, you said. Yeah, that's how you
The
said.
famine, I can't compete with this. Now I don't. This won't help people in Gaza saying, that we are the same pain, we are now with the same tragedy. No, we don't. You know, it's a different story. So, and this would help them better. Because and I think so. We are both Palestinians and Israelis. Palestinians and Jews in Israel. We need this space of this distance, to work through traumas, especially when you are in a leadership positions, in educational positions.
This reminds me of an essay that Rabbi David Hartman wrote in the 1980s. Where he was the essay is titled Auschwitz and Auschwitz and Sinai, where he speaks about the fact that we have been, and it's very similar to what you've been saying, we've let our trauma define who we are, and that stops us from finding out who we are supposed to be as Jews. He was talking about as Jews, but I think this can apply both to Israelis, of course, to Israeli as a nation, as a citizenship. It is, of course, a lot harder when you're still having an ongoing war. So it's hard. It's difficult to try to reflect and process the trauma of October 7th where it feels like October 7th is not exactly behind us, because the hostages are still there, and all, and and obviously the war ongoing, and the tragedy that continues since then. You spoke about religion for a few sentences, and I wonder if you can expand on this more. What do you think is the role of religion in this time? How do you think religion is playing out? How is it used or maybe abused in the Israeli context?
Yeah, I mean, religions, and big traditions. I prefer to talk about traditions, like the Muslim tradition, the Jewish
Mm-hmm.
tradition, like more than religion as a specific faith, These are big supermarkets, with ready-made, solutions for everything, with ready-made, answers, And now you need to shop, now to find what suits your specific context, your specific, your needs as personal needs, collective needs, you need to build your own version. Now, religion is abused, when it is ideologized. And a religion has been ideologized. It has been ideologized by Hamas, now recruiting religion Islam to be part of the, like, to Islamalize, to Islamicize,
Mm-hmm.
the Palestinian cause. The same with what happens in Israel, all these, now messianic, Judaism being now, this is not now something peripheral. These are people are sitting in the government, these are Smotrich, this is like the minister of finance. These are people who are believe really in Atacht al-Geula, these people believe that, that the redemption, we need to accelerate the salvation, accelerate the redemption, need zero zakat, we need to. Now, these are people, with very specific ideas as about the ought to be, about how life as it should be.
Mm-hmm.
And they are trying to impose it on us, they are trying to impose, a specific visions, of life, of the solution of the conflict between Palestinian and Israel. These are imported solutions, solutions, from traditional sources, This is not, a question of inspiring, using the tradition as something that inspires you for dialogue, for reconciliation, for
Mm-hmm.
peace, or, and no, these are very specific visions that are derived from the wells, from the toxic wells of these traditions. These traditions have very healthy wells that we can all drink from, but they are also toxic wells, poisoned wells, full with hate, with the racism, with xenophobia, with you name it, So right now, I think religion has been the idea that religion is reduced, subsumed, being reductive into very specific ideologies, political ideologies, in service of specific political ideologies. This is what, so the struggle in Israel is not only on the meaning and the depth and the borders of the Israeli citizenship, but also on Judaism itself. What does it mean to be a Jew in Israel? The same for the Palestinians. What does it mean to be a Muslim now? For Muslims, the idea of, if you how you treat people who are in captive, how you are you allowed to take into captivity children and women, are you allowed to destroy when you are attacking, even if when you perceive it as a just war. So these are dilemmas for the believers. People who believe, this is about the really tzibor nefesh. This is like the essence of their of their belief, as Muslims, and as Jews. And right now, I'm sorry to say, like people who are in power, especially now in Israel, these are really very influential people, starting from the minister of Ben Gvir and Smotrich and you name it, and they are dictating, even with the Hatufim, people who are in countries,
With the
what is
hostages, yeah.
what is our priority, אין מצווה גדולה יותר מפדיון חטופים, אבל, this is in Judaism, right?
Yeah, there's no greater mitzvah or commandment than to freeing freeing hostages or freeing those who were kidnapped according to Judaism, but we don't see it, is what you're
But
saying. We don't see that. We don't see the people who are championing the freeing of the hostages in the Israeli public square are not the religious ones.
And you know why? Because these people believe from both sides in absolute evil and absolute goodness. The minute they, I could really understand, that Hamas is, I don't think Hamas is Nazi. I don't think Hamas is a it's Nazi. I don't want to compare what Hamas did with the Holocaust. This is dimensioning and undermining the Holocaust. I don't think, but I don't think that Hamas people are are good people. Don't misunderstand me. But I don't think that these are the absolute evil. Because the minute you define an absolute evil, you define an absolute good. You say the absolute good, the absolute, and people who are approaching the world with these absolutenesses, absolutism, like being in the good or the bad, the evil or the. These are the people who are dictating politics right now. This binary vision of the world, that each has his own camp. In Islam we say like you have the fustat, which is like the camp, the tent for the believers and the tent for the heretics. The tent for the Jews and the tent for the rest of the world. The tent for the Muslims, the tent for the non. The minute you believe in this binary, I don't think you could really understand complexity. You could understand how identities works. I'm not only a Palestinian. I'm not only a Muslim. I'm not only an Israeli. I'm not only a man. I'm a mixture of these. So in order to understand this, transsectionality, to understand this, complexity of identities and how a belonging works for these identities with binary view of the world, you can't perceive it. You can't grasp the meaning of it.
So I have to say that how you presented the things, I brittled immediately when you said, for me, Hamas is evil. When I'm seeing and definitely October 7th was not a Holocaust, but if we would have let it go on, it might have been a Holocaust. So like the intention was definitely there, the intention to destroy, and I'm taking from the legal definition of genocide. But I wanna note two things about what you said. I think it's interesting to see that religion in this sense is being, and on this I totally agree with you that we're seeing it in both sides. That religion is almost a tool. It's a tool for achieving different goals, whether it's political goals or national goals. And it's something, and the whole populistic wave that we're seeing across the world, it's utilizing religion. And I don't know if it's religion utilizing politics or politics utilizing religion. And the second is, it's interesting to think what it does, what you're describing, what it does to religion itself, to that marketplace that you've described that maybe is turning into less of a marketplace when it's presented as a clear binary. But I want us to maybe move on and to speak about you mentioned education a few
Just to
times. Yes,
clarify
go on.
one thing. Just to
Yeah, go
clarify,
on.
we tend to think about religious people as, irrational, that, this is something which has to do with irrationality, this is really, this is a false assumption, and that, religion doesn't, accommodate diversity. Religion doesn't accommodate difference. Religion, these are all, like assumptions that unfounded assumptions that religion, is something that, necessary would lead us to a conflict, would lead us to. These are really, I could speak really hours about, how these assumptions, are unfounded, and look at Hamas, I know it's disturbing for a minute, but, look at Hamas. Hamas in 2017 corrected its convention in 2017 to differentiate between Jews and Zionism, to say like, there's a difference between Zionism and Judaism. It is, to call for a Palestinian state on the line, on the 67 lines, like ceasefire lines of 67. This movement for a while it was, and still it's very rational and it's very practical, and they have their, and I think we should treat them as such, as a rational, as a movement with political demands, and to see the idea that we want to prescribe them as the absolute evil. Maybe they are evil, but not absolute. My I think this doesn't help us as in Israelis and as Palestinians to see each other in terms of absolutism. Like this is the absolute evil, this is the absolute good, and then let's start talk. The dialogue can't this is not a good this can't kick the dialogue. This doesn't kick off the dialogue to start the dialogue. So I think, the minute you see you don't dehumanize, and this is what people are trying to say all the time, this is a mechanism of dehumanizing, the minute you dehumanize. So, it is the محبل, it's the terrorist. Now it's vicinity, and vicinity, this is his family, his surroundings, and his, it's really floats, you can't contain it. This absolutism, you can't contain it because it will really reach out for everyone. And I think we better, be very specific about, no, we maybe the war in Gaza for the Israelis is a just war, but let's consider, are these all activities are just activities, could we talk, shouldn't we take accountability when we retaliate? Shouldn't we distinguish between civilians and non-civilians? A lot of questions, you are as a legal expert, you are more acquainted and knowledgeable about this, terminologies, about responsibility and accountability, and, to distinguish between civilians and non-civilians, and also for proportionality, like, and okay, on the 7th of October, more than 1,500, Israelis, were victims of a brutal attack, and a terrorist attack, but we are now, the toll is rising to 33,000, people are killed, including thousands of children and women, so this is, I think this war should stop, there's no way to put it, the war should stop, and to find a solution that would bring all the hostages and the captives, home. We need to bring them home, and there's no way to bring them home without stopping this war. There's no way to restart, the dialogue, the reconciliation, the peace process, the trust between Jews and Palestinians without, taking the lead and putting a halt, a stop for this war.
Yeah.
Sorry
Of course, the
for my passion, but
no, I think I feel your passion, because this has been 6 months, incredibly difficult. So I can't imagine even any other way to speak about this as someone who's experiencing um, this war. Of course, there are two sides for every. I mean, there is a tendency of the world to demand from Israel everything, and not a lot of demands from Hamas, which is probably um, which is probably a disadvantage for wanting to finish this war. Can we speak about you've been talking about the problem in binaries, and to understand the complexity and the nuance. And you've also mentioned at the beginning that there's a difference. I mean, people in Tel Aviv and in Haifa, it's, of course, nothing is right, but there are still, I mean, people are going to schools, and the academia is open, and life is trying to go on. But you have mentioned higher education. You are, of course, the professor for education. Can you speak about the role of education during war, after war, before war, or the role of education in this moment, as you see it, whether descriptively or how should it be?
yeah, I mean, before the academic year was really started,
Mm-hmm.
the fears were inflated, that we will go to the campus, and like in Haifa, that Palestinians and Israelis, soldiers coming from the front, and they're really there was an industry of making fear, of fear politics, that something, the worst is just coming, and but I think that both population showed a lot of maturity. I was really surprised in my classes. The worst thing that you can do is to ignore it, but the minute you speak about it and you put it on the table and you say, like, okay, now this is what we stand for. We stand for a shared vision for the life and the dignity of both Palestinians and Jews. We look for a shared, a homeland, a shared society, a shared state. You define it, you name it. You find. I don't want to go into the politics of it. But right now, as a vision, people feel that you are not Ocher Israel. That you are not. I'm not trying now to, I'm not seeking for their,
The elimination of Israel or something.
the elimination of
Yeah.
Israel.
Yeah.
I have a debate, a dispute on the nature, the depth, the meaning, whatever about the state, but not with the people, with the idea of Israel, with the idea of the self-determination of the Jewish people. So the minute people are, and the minute you say, like, I'm a Palestinian, and I'm also, I feel, solidarity with the people with Israel, the talk starts. People feel that you are authentic, people that feel that you are now not slagonished, like not you're not talking with the slogans, but you are talking, the real thing. And I think education has to do with that, with generating the language of possibilities, language of possibilities. The idea that, what is the function of education is to enable this domain, this domain for freedom of expression, for people to talk, for people to criticize, to express their critique. Now, not all the universities are happy with that, and some universities, like with the are very selective about this, hate speech thing, I think all hate speech should be, should be handled, treated, uh, but you can't be selective about it, like, Palestinian, students, being more subjected, like to this, like Vadot Mishmat, and
Disciplinary committees.
yeah,
So
yeah,
what you're saying is that you object hate peace, but at least the dealing with hate speech should be equal and not
exactly,
subjective. Yeah,
exactly. And now I'm not selective, because
yeah.
this, and also with the professors and with the students, I have sometimes I have, my index for people who could really reconciliate and find the dukiyum and find reconciliation.
Mhm,
You know,
mhm,
believe me, if you took the intelligence people, the homeland security from both sides, they would find, a way to live together in 5 minutes, and
mhm,
then, in my index, in my madad, then what follows is maybe the politicians, because these are very practical people. Don't, and then the people themselves. The hardest thing are the professors, at the universities, because these are captured. These are, being captivated in their own language, in their own jargon. It's very
mhm,
difficult for professors and the universities to generate a language of possibilities, to be authentic, to little bit stay out. You are not only just a professor,
mhm,
delivering, whatever your discipline is. Real life is here and now, and it's in sociology, and it's in political science, and it's
mhm,
in law and education, and we should, we should talk about what's happening, in our classes, and I think to generate this, just to give you one example, about, what I mean by language of possibilities. The
mhm,
minute, for example, I provide my Palestinian students the idea that they can differentiate between a state and homeland, and these are not identical items,
mhm,
that they can feel that al-Fahim and Haifa is Palestine as a homeland, you know, but this is the state of Israel. They
mhm,
live in the state of Israel. They are, but as a consciousness, as a
mhm,
homeland, and the same for the settler in Hebron, if he feels that this is his, Nofeb Rashid, this is like the homeland of his ancestors, it's good, but it's still, he could end up living in a Palestinian state, So the idea that the minute you differentiate between what is homeland and what is a state, and people could really feel that, I could belong, I could, and there is, and there's a state with the specific duties and specific rights.
mhm,
Just one example, the same when you go for like self-determination, when you give your students to distinguish between self-determination as non-interference and self-determination as non-domination. That, we don't want to live as islands, self-determination doesn't mean that, no one interfere in my decisions,
Can
but
you
it
say a
means,
bit more about the distinction?
yeah, like in non-interference, it means, that I'm sovereign for all my decisions. No one can interfere in my
Mhm,
political, economic, whatever, decisions as a state. But
mhm,
this is an illusion. Everyone is in, the Americans, the Palestinians are actually influencing your decisions. But the
mhm,
minute you talk about your self-determination, the right for self-determination as non-domination, no one would dominate me. No
mhm,
one would dictate for me. I have the veto eventually to say no. This people, start thinking a little bit differently. And I think the more, I'm just give like two examples, the more
mhm,
we generate this, kind of language that enables people to look critically at
mhm,
their tradition, at their religion, at their nationality, at their status as citizens. This is
mhm,
where hope lies. Lies in these gaps, in these cracks.
Mhm.
you know. And this is what, I'm sorry. And this is what education is about,
Mhm.
making hope.
That I want you to talk about what you just said, but it feels to me as if it's even not just being critical, but also it's what you talked about before. It's breaking dichotomies, it's breaking binaries, because it allows even the last example that you gave is maybe recognizing that we are holding both places of self-determination at the same time, in a sense.
Yeah, yeah.
What do you mean by education is hope?
You know, there are two kinds of people, people who are optimists, and the only thing that they can do is to say like, okay, it's gonna be good, it's gonna be all right. And there are people who are hope doers. I don't know how to put it in English. They are doers of
Hope
hope.
makers, maybe. Hope makers, maybe.
Yeah, hope makers. Yeah, hope makers. Hope makers. Now, hope makers, hope, it is not an idealistic. This is a program. It's something that you do. It's a program. It's an activity. It's something that you do in your real life and your personal life. And I think education should target more the hope makers. You
Mm-hmm.
know, we should train hope makers. Now, I just give you one example. Just I'm affiliated with the Hartman Foundation. We bring Palestinian educators and Jewish educators to sit and deliberate on foundational texts from their heritage. Now, after the 7th of October, everyone was, silenced. Everyone was saying like all the conceptions failed. We don't find the language, we don't find the exact words. Everyone was really sucked, drawn into a very this swamp of emotions. It was really very heavy.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, for example, this program, as hope makers, we insisted on the conversation. We insisted that from the very beginning, we started sending, like bombs, lesson plans, bringing together again the Palestinian educators and Jewish educators to bring them together to again to talk about the war, to talk about violence. We don't want to be idealistic in the sense we now talk about the light. This is not. We are not talking now about the light. We are talking about what's happening now. Now, this is a very dangerous business. It's not a risky business. I don't guarantee success all the time. But I think the minute you insist on it, and I am happy to say that we have more than 50 schools in this program. This is a very simple act through the Hartman Foundation that creates hope, with tens of educators, uh, being able to talk about the tragedy of the 7th of October, the tragedies in Gaza, through their tradition, through examining their Islamic, Christian, Jewish traditions, and what does it mean to be in jeopardy? What does it mean to be in a need? What does it mean to express solidarity? What does it mean to have this even the what are the limits of vigilance? A lot of really ethical issues, like at work, the ethics at work, for example, what the tradition has to say about ethics at work and how ethics should guide our activities at work. This is just an example of hope makers, and I think the more we try to train, to cultivate this idea of hope makers. I think this is at least hope for the people who are doing it. At least this is transformative for them. If not for their surroundings, but at least for them.
So one last question before I turn to the Q&As. So you gave one example of the hope makers through the from the Wells program, Minabel program that you're the academic advisor of at Hartman. what do you need if you try to generalize it or to take even one step back? What do you need? What do you think needs to happen for the shared society project to work, reinitiate, move forward in these fraught times?
I think we need to focus on the shared, the idea of shared. Now,
Mhm.
whether it, because sometimes the idea of shared society is a smoke screen. People don't want to talk about shared homeland. People don't want to talk about
Mm.
shared state. So they prefer this very
Shared society.
shared society.
Uh-huh.
So I prefer to talk about shared. Let's
Okay.
share. Let's focus on sharing. Let's focus of power sharing, activity sharing. And the minute you go for this sharing thing, and and shared politics. Now, politics is the instrument that we can influence our lives, at a large scale.
Yeah.
Education is good, but also politics. And I
Mm.
think what we need through education is to create this
Mhm.
critical mass, Gramscian
Mhm.
concept of the critical mass
Mhm.
of hope makers, of people who really are convinced that they want to share, whether it's society, whether
Mhm.
it's a state, or whether it's a homeland. Now, and we should learn, I think, from the religious groups in Israel, the Shas, the religious Zionism. They have their own schools, they have their
Mhm.
own institutions, they have their own ethos. But the people who are believing in this shared whatever, the shared vision of life for Palestinians and Israel, they don't have any mechanisms. They don't have enough platforms. They don't have ethos, a very clear ethos. They don't have institutions. They don't have educators. And I think what we need now is to start building these platforms, and especially schools. This is not only bilingual schools, but also shared schools. Not in the idea that Jewish and Palestinians go to learn together, but shared in the idea that they believe in this ethos.
So I love, by the way, the phrase a critical mass of hope makers. I think that should definitely be a title of something. It's very extremely inspiring. I'm turning into the questions. I'm just saying in advance that we have many of those. So I'll get to what I can. Can you give some examples about some of the tensions and the conflicts that have occurred in the classroom and on campuses, and how they have been addressed?
Like these are well documented in reports,
Mhm.
that are available through online,
Yeah.
through the Adala Center for the Legal Rights of the Palestinian Minority,
Mhm.
and the Musawa Center. Just Google Musawa Center. They have a report there on the higher education system. Also, the Adala Center about this freedom of expression. How this were handled. With very
Mhm.
specific examples. But um, the most disturbing thing is the militarizing of the campuses, and has nothing to do with the war now, with the 7th of October. This is something that started, a while before
Uh-huh.
the war, because sometimes you go into the campuses and you feel that you are in a military camp. A lot of
What do you mean
soldiers.
by that?
A lot of young men, with in their midim,
In their uniform?
in their military uniform, with weapons, with long,
Uh,
with the very, like M16 and all these sorts
mhm.
of And this is very disturbing, to go into a, and now this could, and I'm praying that nothing would happen, because you can never tell when someone would take a gun and start, and
There is in
would
general a proliferation of guns in Israel right now
exactly,
after following
exactly.
October 7th.
Yeah, and with the policy of the minister, the new minister,
Yes.
was is allowing carrying. So, and also on the campuses are having contracts with the army
Hmm.
for education of some of officers, of
Yeah.
soldiers, and so there's a lot of militarizing of the academic spaces in Israel. This is very most disturbing. And
Have you
about
seen,
specific cases,
uh,
I
you refer
directed.
people to the Adala and
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
Musawa.
Have you seen, I'm seeing for more questions. Have you seen tensions between reservists that are returning to the university and Palestinian students in your university in Haifa?
Not that I have witnessed myself,
Yeah. So no.
but I'm aware of the tension. I've
Mm,
just described the tension. It's not just
yes.
the reserves. It's as people who are coming, to be
So it's
educated.
I guess I'm asking, is it, I mean, one reflection of this is what you're saying, that people are walking around with weapons, but I assume there might also be a tension on, like a substantive level.
Yeah, I mean the hate speech is it's rising,
Yeah.
hundreds of times. Like these students eventually go home, and they are on the Facebook, and
Yeah.
maybe they are expressing the hate speech, that not as a student, but as being
As a
outside of the
citizen.
university as a
Mm,
citizen. And this is the most disturbing thing,
mm,
it
mhm.
is the social networks, and the rising of this hate speech and racism, and it's really very disturbing. And the selective enforcement again.
Yeah. So someone asked here about your thoughts regarding the absolutism dividing American college campuses. And maybe I'll add, is this so this is one. And I wonder if you have any thoughts about, is this a generational occurrence of absolutism, or do you see it in all generations as something of this period of time?
Yeah, I've studied also in the United States. I studied at Penn State, ages
Mhm.
ago. But I'm still, and my study was about globalization, actually, how globalization is framed, perceived through the American education, the social studies education in American schools. And what I found that, even Americans, they think that, globalization is happening for them. They are the victims of globalizations.
Mhm.
They are enveloped, they are not makers of globalization. They are not, so I think in a way, I want to say that even in America, people are also subjected to this fear politics that divides between us and them. And I think the Trumpism, if I
Mhm.
may
Mhm.
say that, that which really, instigate, masses, American masses against minorities, against, like the media. This is the same, everywhere. This is in a very short word, populism.
Mhm.
Populism works in politics, populism works in religion, and
Mhm.
this divide between us and them works beautifully,
Mhm. Mhm.
by extremists, both in politics, secular and religious politicians.
So you're seeing this as a phenomenon that is really going through all of the world, really. So
It's a global phenomenon.
global
It's a
phenomenon. Yeah. Yeah.
phenomenon in Hungary, in India, in
Yeah.
Israel, in the States. The
Yeah.
idea that you wanna there is someone who is speaking in the name of the people, in the name of the American people, in the name of the Israeli people, there is this strong leader, who represents, that the people he is against, the elites, the judicial elites,
Yeah.
the media elites, the army elites, and this is very global, and this is what creates eventually this divisions between us
Yeah.
and them.
I think that that in a sense in American campuses it's the mirror image of the same thing, because in American campuses Israel is the true evil, or the highest evil that can ever be and should be dismantled immediately. It's kind of a mirror image. A related question, someone who asked about what you are describing in education. How do you how do we put, where is it, how can we put into effect what you described in education in Haifa and in Tel Aviv and in Pennsylvania? How are we putting on the table that we are not seeking to we are not seeking the elimination of either Israel or Palestine? How do we get to thinking of our houses as just our houses rather than our nation? Like what you described before, how do we do that?
I think we are not doing enough, and we are
Yeah.
not as institutions, neither in Haifa, neither in all universities, we are not doing enough in this idea. But I think the minute, it's about being authentic, authentic teaching and authentic, and the way you do it, there's no prescription, I think everyone, and as a professor, I teach, for example, reading educational texts. I read with my students the 1984 by George Orwell. Okay. Now, this is, for me, this is an educational text. This is a relevant text. This is about contemporary Israel. This is about contemporary America. This is about everything, So whether students could reflect, deliberate, we study together, the story or the tale of Michiyahu, Hanavi, like with the false prophets, and from the Bible, the Tzedekyahu, and I don't know if you are familiar with the story of the Hanavi. This is
Can you say, if you want to say a few words on it, but if you don't, that's okay.
This is the idea, they want to go to war, המלך של ארם והמלך של, they want to go to war, and he's trying to convince, everyone that, he's inviting, prophets to tell him whether he should go or shouldn't go to war. And everyone say, like, go to war, encouraging to war. There's one prophet who says no. A true, like, intellectual who would speak truth to power and say, no, would end up very bad to you. And he goes into prison. Now, the whole story about how we speak truth to power, and what does it mean to be sincere to your consciousness and to your authenticity. Now, we studied this with Palestinian and with in my class, Now, should we deliberate on this? Of course, there's a huge text, poems by Mahmoud Darwish, about the idea of a homeland, and language. And to put it short, you do it. I realized that someone here said that the religion of Islam is not a market place. Of course, it's not a market. This is a metaphor, I'm sorry for everyone, I speak in metaphors, a lot of in metaphors, so it's what I mean that, there are so many versions, ideas, ideologies within Islam, be it a Shia Islam, Sunni Islam, Muslim brothers, Hamas, Jihad, these are all already made versions, visions of Islam, and we need to be now wise consumers, how to go and build our own faith from, what is provided to us, back to the
Or
sources.
yeah, or add
Yeah.
versions as you're doing actively. This is another question is from our colleague Professor Rami Zidan. I wonder how we should see the recent selection of Professor Muna Maroun to become the provost of the University of Haifa. In what ways do you think this will help, if at all, in creating a better climate and welcoming space to Palestinians on campus, on the sense of restoring the sense of shared society for students that has been affected by the ongoing war?
I think the idea that, integrating, more Palestinian professors into the Israeli academia, this is a very positive step. Right now, we are around 3 to 4% of all
Wow.
the, every fifth person in Israel is a
So
Palestinian.
21% from the population,
Yeah,
and
but still,
wow.
of the faculty members, we are 3 to 4%. In Haifa, maybe it's a little bit higher because we have a higher percentage of Arab students. So it's a positive move. I think, especially when it comes to this, a very high position of leadership in the.
Yes.
So I see it a very positive, but this doesn't guarantee a change, The proof is in the pudding, It depends really what you do with these positions. From previous experiences, people were co-opted into these positions. People were put in positions of being a dean, not a rector yet, and this is really for the first time, that an Arab professor, distinguished, really highly appreciated, Muna in this position. So it's but we have the experience, we should be to take it in a vigilant, in a lot of vigilant, to be to this approach. I hope she would do that, she would do that, and I trust from the little I know about her. I don't know her in person, but from the little know, she's a very practical, and she's very well deserved. This is a well deserved appointment. And let's see.
So maybe the last question for today, after or in the context of the severed trust, or the shattered, I would say probably, trust after October 7th, should we be teaching or talking more about the psychology of extremism? And I think that it also relates to some of what you said even before October 7th.
Yes. The simple answer is yes. We need to unpack this, because it's very easy to divide, people into moderates and extremism, and people who are good people, bad people, again, who is moderate and who is extremist and who is radical, who is fundamentalist, all these words, we needs to be, people, for example, sometimes, say, I'm a fundamentalist, Ayman Agbaria said, are you a fundamentalist? Say, yeah, I'm fundamentalist, if being a fundamentalist means going to the basics, to the fundamental things, the fundamental foundations of your faith, the answer is yes. I'm a fundamentalist. I want to go to the principles of Islam's, not necessarily of the previous models of Islam's. People mix between principles and models. So in this sense, I'm also I'm a fundamentalist. So let's be also vigilant about these terminologies.
And on how we define extremism and how we define being moderates. Ayman, thank you so much for this conversation, which was thought-provoking and at times challenging, but I think it's important for us to hear things that challenge us, and to be able to have conversations which are difficult conversations. I really want to thank you about the model of of how'd you say, it's a critical mass of hope makers, which I think is the most apt summary of this conversation. Thank you so much, Ayman.
Thank you, Ayman, and thank you, Masua, for this talk. And I also agree it would be amazing if we could have more hope makers out there in dialogue with one another, even when it's uncomfortable and difficult to have the conversation. So thank you so much for joining us. I look forward to seeing you again soon.